Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I was inspired by Dave Lee and James Dauma's recent interview to take a little trip down memory lane. During their chat on FSD Part 2 recently, James Douma, when he was talking to Dave Lee, described the perfect Robotaxi, and as it turned out, it was exactly the car that I had designed back in the summer of 2020, July 10th, 2020. I just checked actually, and that's where I got this video from. But today what I want to do is present this video to you and then talk a little bit about how it was a very good Model 2 or $25,000 Tesla, but it's an even better Robotaxi. Let's take a look. In January of 2020, Tesla announced that they were creating a design studio in their Gigafactory in Shanghai to help design a car in China that could be produced for the world at large. A really cool idea. Interestingly, in June 2020, Tesla China announced that they were taking submissions from people outside the traditional design discipline to create a new compact car. I'm just going to call it the Tesla Model 2 just to make it easy, but whatever they end up naming it. And so I was like, wow, that is a fantastic idea. I am not a car designer at all, but I do a lot of design for other areas, and so I kind of have the design process in my head. Therefore, I went about the mental activity of trying to design something, and I want to walk us through that process today and show what I came up with. So yeah, today I want to talk about the Tesla compact car, which again I'm going to call the Model 2. And I'm going to go through my process of design. I'll definitely show you some of the design elements of it because I think it's kind of cool. But I'm going to go through the process first and then walk you through the actual design itself. So I started off by thinking about the needs. Again, we're going to go with first principles. We're not going to think about how cars have been designed in the past. We're going to kind of throw all that stuff away. But what are the needs of this car? Number one, it needs to be a compact city car. So I have a 2013 Mini Cooper. And it turns out it's 3.6 meters long. And I figure that the more modern Mini Coopers have gotten a lot bigger. So anyway, I'm using that one as a guide because it fits 4 people in the car. And it's a compact car, but it's pretty reasonable. It does a lot of good things. So that is my guide. It was about 3.6 meters long. It needs to be able to hold 4 adults comfortably. It has to have a 400 kilometer or about 250 mile range at least, and that needs to be on a 50 kilowatt hour or less battery. So we can't just throw a gigantic 100 kilowatt hour battery in there, although honestly it'd take up a lot of the car for that small. Because of that, it needs to be an aerodynamic shape. That's a complicated thing. If you look at the Mini Cooper shape, it's I call it the squashed minivan look. It has a minivan and you just squish it like that and force all the people inside it. And the front and the back are not particularly aerodynamic. The back in particular is terrible because you create a lot of vortices and non-laminar flow in the back end of the car. So these are all bad things. So how to think about that, right? These are challenges. So it's got to be able to be aerodynamic at highway speeds. So 90, 100 kilometers an hour, 55, 60 miles an hour. It's also very importantly got to be inexpensive to build and purchase. My target, thought is that it should be somewhere in the $20,000 to $23,000 range, US money, of course. It must be able to haul a reasonable amount of stuff. It must be safe. That's really important. Compact cars are more dangerous than larger cars, so it needs to be safe. And it must have optional full self-driving so it can be used as a robotaxi in cities because that would be a perfect use case for it. Tangent to that is full self-driving is expensive. And for a car like this, you're approaching half the cost of the car, right? If the car is $20,000 and full self-driving by 2021 or 2022 is $9,000 or $10,000, you're looking at 50% the cost of the car. So something's got to be done. My understanding is that Tesla is going to be rolling out a subscription model eventually, and that makes sense. If you kind of amortize the cost of full self-driving over 5 or 10 years or something, rather than paying it all up front, that's going to make it much more appealing to a cost-conscious consumer, which certainly somebody who's looking at a $20,000, $25,000 car is a cost-conscious consumer. Things not to get worked up about. So things, you've got to make decisions here. So the number one thing not to get worked up about is performance. If it doesn't perform fantastically, if it's not 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, that goes out the window. Aesthetics are also thrown out. I love aesthetics are important, but they're less important than the functionality. So this is definitely form follows function kind of design. Also, the traditional shape. Let's not worry about the squashed minivan look or any other look. Let's just, again, start at first principles and design this car. In all honesty, when I did this, I, in my mind, designed it from the people out. So I sat the people in a volume of space and started designing the space around them to try to figure out how this would look. So the design process. First, I put all of these factors into my head. I thought it all through. I thought what's needed, what's not needed, etc., etc. I stuck it in my brain. Then I molded over. Then I went away. Then I molded over some more. Then I went out for a bike ride a couple of days ago, and I got like the, aha. Literally, I was on the bike and I went like that, right? Because I had this like main idea. And the main idea I had was we can get rid of the idea that all the passengers have to face forward. We can take the front passengers who need to face forward because they're driving, and we can take the rear passengers and we can face them backwards. And then suddenly we can create a shape of a car that's much more like a wing, much more aerodynamic. We take the luggage space between the seats instead of at the back of the car, so that you've got the front seat, you've got a gap, and then you put luggage, storage, etc., and you've got other people here, and then you've got the back of the car. You can also, as opposed to taking the seats and folding them on top of the other seats, which loses volume, if you're going to use the car for hauling, you take the back seats and you slide them back a little bit and you put the seat down. And so you actually get more space. So there's another element that you can actually get into to make this even more interesting. So this resolves a whole bunch of problems that were inherent in a traditional car design. So what I'm going to do here is pause. I'm going to kind of look at this in Maya because I've got some 3D, very quick mock-ups of this idea. And then we'll come back and I'll talk about the process again. Now that I've talked a little bit about the design process, let's take a look at the outcome. So as you notice, it actually, because of random things, it actually ended up taking a lot of cues from the Cybertruck. So it kind of looks like that. It looks like a smaller version of it, but there are significant differences. So certainly there is 30X stainless steel with straight edges, so everything can be bent and shaped very easily out of very few pieces of steel. It's got a nearly symmetrical wing shape, so the air kind of flows over the top and it flows back down the end. So you don't have that kind of classic like small car like flat back where you get a lot of vortices, and that is afforded by the fact that the rear passengers are facing towards the rear instead of towards the front, and there's two in each one. This particular angle doesn't show them both, but there are a driver, passenger, so there's 4 people in the car. The storage, because of the way that these people are sitting, the storage is actually placed between the passengers here. Notice that there is a rear-facing rear door for ease of entry, so that should be relatively easy. It's more or less symmetrical with the front door just a little bit shorter. There's also a very low clearance flat bottom for improved aerodynamics, right? So the air is essentially, the idea is to make the air flow around this as laminarly as possible. Moving on here to a semi-transparent view where you can see a little bit better. There's a front crumple zone that's built in. There's a single motor here. You can't really see it, but it's basically right near where the axle is, which is more or less the way the Model 3 and the Model Y look right now. There's a single piece roll cage, so if you go back to here, you can see this a little bit better, but this is a single piece here. And so the roll cage is extra strong because of that. The top doesn't have a sunroof. That's also a single piece. So you create a kind of a shell here, which makes it very, very strong. There's a rear crumple zone. You also have rear airbags facing towards the back. So in case there's a rear-on collision, the passengers will have airbags that will come out and help them. Also run-flat tires. There's not enough room to put a spare in a compact car, so you add run-flat tires, which are more expensive, but they're certainly a huge advantage because you don't have to worry about a flat so much. Again, the storage is between the passengers here with the seats up, and there are 4 passengers in here. There's still quite a bit of room for storage there. And finally, there's a 50 kilowatt hour battery, approximately. Again, maybe you could get away with a little bit smaller one if you're only looking for a 400 kilometer range. And finally, here's a close-up of the back seat where the seat is actually pulled out. So again, the seat pulls forward like this, and then this seat folds or flips down like this. So it slides back and down, not folded on top, so it gives you extra room in terms of storage space. And again, my thought is that you would have something like a window shade down here that would actually pull and roll out and fit over the top of these seats. That would cover the back with some sort of plastic or canvas tarp that would protect the seats from being scratched if you were putting something harsh into here. Particularly useful for the Robotaxi land. Okay, so finally, let's just take a quick look at this in Maya, which is a 3D animation package, and that's what I used to kind of create this thing quickly. You can see the basic shape. It's a wing sort of shape, a little bit stubbier in the back than in the front, but generally symmetrical. You have rear opening rear doors so that it's very easy for the passengers to get in and out of. I hate getting in and out of a small car, especially in the back seat. It's very difficult to do that. So that's advantageous there. It's got, kind of a Cybertrucky looking front end. The bumper's been moved up so it's out in front. It's got some nice kind of running things along the side for design accents. It's got a rear bumper here. It's got a cool rear light. And you can see that there's actually quite a bit of volume in here. And in fact, you can see where there's luggage where it goes between the two seats. So there's quite a bit of room for the passengers. You can sit upright. You don't have to worry about that. If I take off the visibility of the outside, you can see where the motor is here sitting next to the axle. And again, the battery and luggage and the people sitting there quite comfortably. So in generally, I think it's a pretty nice looking thing. Again, made out of 30X stainless steel and some plastic around the edges for the bumpers and the guards. No paint, no worries about that. All straight lines, very easy to build. It's got that nice shell, so it's made out of a single piece throughout this entire area, which can create a very strong roll cage for safety. And again, crumple zones like at the rear and the front, just to make sure that there's extra safety involved. So let's talk about the process now. The number one thing about this is, how do you make this car an inexpensive car to build and therefore to purchase? So here I cheated a little bit. I used the Cybertruck as a model. The idea is to build the car instead of building a frame and then putting a very fragile and expensive aluminum body on top of it, or shell on top of it. I decided to go with the Carapace model, which is basically build the whole thing out of stainless steel, which is heavier, yes, but you don't need a subframe, and you just place that on top of the whole drivetrain chassis at the bottom of the car, and you're done. Inexpensive to build, all straight lines, obviously, so you don't have like the curves. You don't have paint. It's all basically 30X stainless steel, so there's no paint involved. There's no curves involved. Everything is just bent out of a very, very few sheets of steel. So simple to make. The manufacturing technique has already, by then, the manufacturing technique will have been worked out with the Cybertruck so that it's a known quantity. The Tesla will know how to build these cars out of sheets of 30X stainless steel, how to bend them properly. They'll have the machining for it. So all of this will make the car a much, much less expensive car to build. Also, the car is only going to have a single motor base version. I suppose it could have a dual motor, like rear and front wheel drive car, but that really seems unnecessary for the purpose of this car, because it's a city car and performance is not that important, and it's not going to be off-roading or anything like that. I definitely would not recommend doing that with this car. So even having a dual motor option doesn't seem necessary. So if you think about that, that means that you only need to produce one model. There's no paint colors, there's no different shapes, there's no different sizes. It's just one car that comes off. In a way, it's kind of like the Volkswagen, the original, way back when, with a refined version of it, a modern version of that type of car. It's very, very simple to build. There's only one of them. The production line can be simplified. You just make one. You don't have to have a paint shop. You're saving a ton of money on all of these things. So this is a huge advantage in a way of making it a much less expensive car. In addition, only having a 50 kilowatt hour battery, or possibly even a 40 kilowatt hour battery, at today's cost, that's $5,000. So that's like a quarter of the cost of the car. But in another year or two, I expect that cost is going to go down to maybe $80 a kilowatt hour or something. So anyway, it will be expensive, and it'll still be the most expensive part of the car, but it's not going to be that expensive anymore, and it won't preclude this car coming out at, in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. The next question is, how do you make this safe? It may seem like that's a difficult thing to do with people facing forwards and backwards, but if you think about it, there are airbags in the front of the car. So the deal would be to put airbags in the hatch and on the rear side, so you'd have rear curtain airbags and things, and those would poof out if you had a rear end collision. If you had a front end collision, the back passengers are actually safer in a car like this because they're already this way, and so the pressure is going to force them into the seats. So that's actually advantageous if you had a front end collision. And obviously a side to side collision is a wash between however people are sitting. You would also make crumple zones, so the very front of the car where the motor is and where the frunk would be, and the very back of the car, which is the kind of tailing off of the hatch part, would be built to be crumple zones. The middle part, which has the doors, well, between the doors, that's that center sort of post, which could kind of be one long object, right? That would be really cool because you could build it super, super strong. So the middle part is a cage that's extra strong. The ends of it are kind of crumple zones, so it protects the main part of the cabin where the people are, and it sacrifices the edges for safety. You also have front and back glass for extreme visibility, right? So basically the whole car is kind of a fishbowl. You can see out of it in all directions, and that's super advantageous. That means you don't get into accidents as often. And of course, in addition to that, you have the autopilot capabilities of the Tesla, which are getting better and better, which should hopefully avoid getting into an accident entirely. Hauling. So with the seats separated in the middle, you actually put your luggage or whatever else it is, groceries or things like that, between the seats if there are 4 people in the car. If there are not 4 people in the car, like I said, you actually slide the seat, you push the top part of the seat down, and you have a very large space that you can put a lot of stuff onto. I would again recommend that Tesla would either build as an option or hopefully would include something that was kind of like a window shade almost, that would be under that rear seat, that would pull up and around and over the seats and would be fitted over the top of the seats so that it would protect it, so you wouldn't have to worry, right? If you put lumber in there or something like that. It can happen, right? People have to use the car that they have. So if you put something in there that could potentially scratch the top of the seats, you would have a covering that was just built in. So that would be very nice for that. Obviously, with the seats pushed down like this, instead of folded on top of each other, you actually gain numerous centimeters in terms of vertical height for the car. So that actually allows you to haul more stuff. That's actually a nice advantage also. Performance. Yeah, I said that we were going to sacrifice that, but if you think about that, this is a very lightweight car, and even with only one electric motor, it's going to have a lot of torque right off the line. So I have a feeling it will feel pretty zippy, especially in city driving conditions where, you just kind of you don't need a real high top speed. You just mostly need to accelerate quickly if you need to. So I think it'll feel plenty zippy. Obviously, it's not going to be a performance model car, so you're not going to be getting those crazy specs, but it should be a lot of fun to drive even so. And compact cars are fun. They're small, they can kind of weave in and out of things. I really enjoy driving the Mini a lot, so I think it would be a really fun car to drive. Finally, using the car as a Robotaxi. So 4-passenger capability is great. That means that it's got a capacity for 4 passengers. Also, if you can fold the seats down, it's got a capacity for like 1 or 2 passengers, plus going to Europe for a month, right? Suitcases on top of suitcases and things like that. So it's got the capability of being utilized by passengers in a lot of different ways. Obviously, with the full self-driving capability, that allows you to have you don't have to take up one of the seats with a driver, so you could actually have 4 passengers in there, which is great. That's a big advantage. It's compact, so navigating through the streets of a city and parking would be relatively easy. So again, advantageous for the user, but also as a Robotaxi because it's easier to park the car someplace and keep it out of the way. You only need a small parking space to get the car into. And just returning to the question of full self-driving capabilities one more time, again, asking $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000 for full self-driving all at once for a car that's this expensive is probably not workable. Even people who might want to casually use this as a Robotaxi are going to balk at that. So I think, again, Tesla's going to have to go with a subscription model and charge some amount of money per month, which you could then cancel, right? So that if you wanted to use it as a Robotaxi for 3 or 4 months and then stop using it, that you could cancel the subscription and not use it anymore. So I think that's an important point to throw in there. I hope you enjoyed this little tour of my brain and thinking through the design process and how I go about doing something like this. Again, I'm not a car designer. I'm sure there's issues with this car that I haven't thought of yet, but I did try to think through a lot of the problematic areas. And again, I kind of went back to first principles. I kind of thought about volumetrically how human beings are in a car, what you need to use a car for, what you can throw away and not be too worried about. So that was the sort of process. And I hope that I came up with a design that at least is interesting and piques people's curiosity out there. All right, so first of all, as I'm sure you noticed, there was a substantial upgrade in the set and everything, and the camera and all of that stuff that's involved with filming now. I have actually made changes in the last couple of years, and actually just today I made a change and, changed things around. So I've moved my desk and my setup, so I only have one camera set up now rather than two. So that should make things a little bit more consistent. The surfboard will now be in the middle of the thing from now on instead of off to the side when I'm at my computer. So hopefully that will make things a little better. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'm still playing around with exactly how big I'm going to be framed in the sentence and whether I want my microphone in the shot or things like that. So anyway, let me know what you think about that, whether you'd rather have the microphone right up in my face and get the better audio quality or have it slightly further away and have the mystique of not having a microphone in the scene. Anyway, I would love to know your thoughts about that. As far as the video is concerned, I also would love to have your thoughts. I went through the design process because at the time that was the thing that I was thinking about, because the Chinese design studio had put out a sort of bid or whatever, an open proposal. And I did actually propose it, but that obviously went nowhere. But I think that this is a really, really ideal Robotaxi design. Again, it's got stainless steel, so it's pretty much indestructible, right? You can't really do anything to the outside of it. If it ends up having the bulletproof glass like the Cybertruck, that would also make it less destructible, right? Because then dings and things like that from, I don't know, acorns dropping on it or just random stuff happening to it, you'd have less dings, less scratches. So if you're looking at a vehicle that's expected to drive 500,000 to 1 million miles in its lifespan, rather than 100 to 150,000 miles in its lifespan, you need to look at things that are going to be more durable. Additionally, of course, if you're looking at a Robotaxi, a single motor is absolutely fine. That's going to get you where you need to go. It's not going to have that super acceleration, but as James Douma said, this is a thing to get you from point A to point B rather than your pride and joy. I think that's kind of a good way of looking at this. If you're just riding in this thing, you could care less whether it looks beautiful or is super fast or not, as long as it gets you where you're going and it's comfortable enough on the inside. Obviously make it easy to clean, maybe rubber floor mats, things like that, so that you can easily clean it out if you need to. But generally speaking, if it's comfortable inside the vehicle and it's flexible, like a hatchback, again, I thought that that was a really good way to go, was a hatchback type of idea. So you could either put passengers in it or you could turn it into a hatchback. I, at the time, thought that the rears facing seating was a really, really ideal way to go. I still actually do. I don't know if anybody will have the guts to do that. Just to put that in perspective, again, trains, people sit backwards in trains. They don't have a problem with that. And everybody that I've talked to has been like, oh no, the people sitting backwards are going to get seasick and things. But if you look at those jump seats that already exist, in fact, the Model Y, if you get the 7-seater, if you can find one of those, it's got jump seats that face backwards there too. So I think that's a completely reasonable solution. And then if you design it so that it folds flat, so that you then can haul stuff if you need to. For example, you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, get a bunch of paint or some equipment or things like that. And that's what you need the transportation for rather than human beings, is you need it for the equipment to get back to your place. Then that's a perfectly adequate use too. So a flexible vehicle that's pretty indestructible is the way to go in my mind. Now, one thing I would add to my original video is the actual structure of the vehicle underneath. A single piece stamping would be incredible. I don't know if Tesla will be able to do this, but if they can do two-piece type stamping for the Cybertruck, as big as that's going to be, they might be able to get IDRA to build them a gigapress that can pop out the entire underbody of the vehicle in one go rather than three. Currently, it's for the Model Y, it's the back, the front, and then there's a structural battery pack. And you might say but wait, what about the structural battery pack? Well, what I would say is that what you do is you stamp the whole thing out with the bottom of the structural battery pack, you fill it in with the batteries, you put that pink foam stuff that Monroe and Associates had such a difficult time taking apart, put that on, seal it all up, and that becomes the structural element. So you don't have to make the middle part of the vehicle as thick and structurally sound as you would if that was going to be taking all the weight by itself, but you sort of pre-make it. It's just like a pie tin that you're going to fill with pie. You make it relatively thin, but then you put the batteries in and you put all that stuff in, and then it becomes structural. I think that they could do that. I don't know. That's an incredibly complicated thing to do, to make one entire piece as the underbody. But if they can do that, Elon Musk said he wanted to do half the effort to build these vehicles. That's literally what he said in the Q3 earnings call recently. And if they're going to be looking at half the effort, they've got to get rid of as much stuff as possible. And one one giant, bang, spit it out. The whole thing is done on the underbody and keep on going. That seems like a pretty amazing way to go. And then if you add to that what James was calling the origami top, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. But basically you're taking sheet metal of stainless steel, bending it into shape so it's structurally sound and is part of the frame and makes everything very, very solid and rigid. You've got a vehicle that you can construct out of very, very few parts. And again, you just use one motor. You don't have to have a super duper motor. It doesn't have to do 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds or something. It can do 0 to 60 in 7 or 8 seconds because again, it's just a Robotaxi. All of those things really stack up. And in my mind, I can't imagine why you would want to have a paint shop if you're trying to develop something as inexpensive as the Robotaxi. And in my mind, you can get any color you want as long as it's stainless steel gray. And of course, if a fleet bought this vehicle, they could always put their own stamp on it, literally, or they could put magnetic things on, or they could paint it, or they could put, covers on it or anything they want to. So they can change the look of it after the fact if they want to. But the basic vehicle would just be that stainless steel gray. And that means that Tesla doesn't have to deal with any paint shop. And that removes a huge amount of the work involved in building a vehicle. So anyway, like I said, I just wanted to go back, down memory lane. This is something that like a whopping 514 people, literally. I just went and checked. That's how many people watched this original video. I was, making 0 waves back at that time. Nobody was paying attention. But I think that this model is actually a very viable way to think about designing this car. And as I've been saying for 2 years and 4 months, basically, I really hope that Tesla is paying attention to this and that's what they do, because I really think that this is what they should do. They should build something like this that's really, really mass producible, really hard to damage, really effective as a taxi, even more than a vehicle that people would purchase individually. Anyway, let me know what you think about that, whether you have any design tweaks or whether you have a wholly different idea. I would be super interested to know. And also let me know about what you think about the new, basic idea of setting. I can zoom out a little bit if you want, if this is too close in. Anyway, just give me some ideas about that. I would love the feedback. And of course, if you do enjoy this video, please do subscribe. Most people are not subscribed who watch these things. I really want to get to 50,000 subscribers because I'm going to do something stupid. I haven't quite figured out what it is. I already know what I'm going to do if I ever get to 100,000 subscribers. So everybody should just go ahead and subscribe, and then I'll get to 100,000 and I will do something really stupid. But I'm getting to 50,000. I'm definitely going to do something stupid. So please do subscribe. And of course, hit the bell notification icon, tell your friends, all of that other good stuff. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon who are all subscribed, I assume. I really do appreciate everything you do for me and you do for the channel. Thank you all so, so much. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.